Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was Disney's golden boy, until he wasn't. At 10 years old, he became the first male child actor signed to an exclusive contract with Walt Disney Studios, starring in Song of the South in 1946. By 1950, he was Hollywood's brightest young star, winning a Juvenile Academy Award for The Window and So Dear to My Heart. Then came Treasure Island, where he played Jim Hawkins, and Peter Pan in 1953, where he voiced the title character and served as the live-action reference model. Walt Disney reportedly saw him as embodying his own youthful ideal, until puberty changed everything. By 1953, Disney executives decided Driscoll was no longer right for their films. The official reason? Severe acne, which they claim made him difficult to photograph. But some industry insiders speculate there was more to it. Disney's preference for clean-cut, wide-eyed protagonists was shifting, and Driscoll no longer fit the mold. Whatever the reason, he wasn't even told in person. One day, he arrived at the studio lot and was simply turned away at the gate. His contract had been terminated without warning. Without Disney's backing, Driscoll struggled. Roles dried up, and by his late teens, he turned to substance use. Arrests followed, possession, altercations, even a stint in prison. By the 1960s, he was unrecognizable, homeless, and living in abandoned buildings in New York City's East Village. Then, in March of 1968, his body was found in a deserted tenement. No identification, no fanfare. He was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave on Hart Island. It wasn't until 1972, when his mother began searching for him, that the heartbreaking truth came out. Her son had been gone for years, and no one had even known. Anissa Jones. August 28, 1976. Anissa Jones is found unresponsive in a friend's home in Oceanside, California. The coroner's report is grim, a deadly cocktail of various substances. Officially ruled an accident, but for those who knew her struggles, it felt like the tragic final note in a story that had been unraveling for years. Jones had been a household name since she was 8, playing Buffy on Family Affair from 1966 to 1971. The role made her famous, but it also trapped her. Hollywood only saw her as the pigtailed girl with the Mrs. Beasley doll. When the show ended, so did her career. She auditioned for new roles, but casting directors couldn't see past Buffy. Some say she tried for grittier parts, desperate to break free from her child star image, but the industry had already moved on. Off-screen, life wasn't much kinder. Her parents' bitter divorce forced her into a custody battle. Then in 1974, her father passed away, leaving her emotionally adrift. She quit school, moved in with friends, and as entertainment historian Jeffrey Mark later described, fell into a cycle of petty shoplifting, taking jobs and quitting, bad sleeping patterns, bad eating patterns, incredible mood swings. Without Hollywood or family stability, she was left to navigate adulthood alone. In early 1976, she inherited nearly $200,000 from her Family Affair earnings. Some hoped it would be a fresh start. Instead, it became fuel for her self-destructive habits. Friends recalled she had been partying heavily in the weeks leading up to her death. Kathy Garver, her former co-star, later reflected, "She was little, and that was just too much for her body to handle." Her death became yet another cautionary tale of Hollywood's child stars, celebrated one moment, discarded the next. And for those who had grown up watching Buffy, the tragedy was painfully real. Scotty Beckett. At just 6 years old, Scotty Beckett was stealing scenes in Our Gang. His signature look, crooked cap, oversized sweater, reminiscent of classic child stars before him. By the time he portrayed young Al Jolson in The Jolson Story in 1946, critics praised his performance as heartfelt and strikingly believable. But behind the charm, trouble was brewing. As he grew older, Hollywood's golden boys struggled to transition into adult roles. The offers dwindled and Beckett turned to alcohol and drugs, habits that quickly spiraled out of control. His legal troubles piled up: drunk driving, drug possession, forgery, and even assault. In 1954, he led police on a high-speed chase, crashed his car, and attempted to flee on foot. The promising young actor had become another cautionary tale of Hollywood's harsh realities. By the late 1950s, his career was in ruins. He made multiple attempts to escape his downward spiral, but each effort ended in heartbreak. Then on July 10, 1968, he was found lifeless in a Los Angeles motel room. The cause? A substance-related incident involving barbiturates. For those who remember Our Gang or The Jolson Story, Scotty Beckett remains frozen in time, the bright-eyed boy with a winning smile long before the industry and his own demons took their toll. Carl Switzer. Hollywood has a way of making stars shine bright, then burning them out. Carl Switzer knew that better than most. As the mischievous alfalfa in our gang, he was one of the most recognizable child actors of the 1930s. But by the time he reached adulthood, that fame had turned into a curse. Casting directors saw only the freckle-faced troublemaker, not the man trying to build a career. Desperate for work, Switzer took whatever he could get. Bit parts in films like White Christmas and The Defiant Ones, odd jobs as a bartender, even training hunting dogs. But money was always tight, and trouble seemed to follow him. In early 1959, Switzer was embroiled in a bizarre dispute over a lost hunting dog. He had loaned the animal to a man named Moses Stilts, who later claimed it had run off. Switzer demanded $50 in compensation, about $500 in today's money. But Stilts refused. On the night of January 21st, Switzer showed up at Stilts' house, allegedly intoxicated and furious. What happened next remains a mystery. Stilts claimed Switzer pulled a knife, forcing him to fire in self-defense. But years later, an eyewitness, Tom Corrigan, the son of a Western film star, told a different story. According to him, Switzer was leaving when Stilts shot him. The truth may never be known. Switzer's death barely made the papers. That same day, legendary director Cecil B. DeMille passed away, bearing the tragic end of the former child star in the news cycle. At just 31, the boy America once adored as alfalfa was gone, his name fading into Hollywood's long list of forgotten tragedies. Bobby Buntrock, April 7, 1974. The quiet town of Keystone, South Dakota was rocked by tragedy when Bobby Buntrock's car plunged into Rapid Creek. The bridge had been damaged in the deadly Black Hills flood 2 years earlier, and while repairs were underway, safety measures were questionable. Some reports suggest there were no proper barricades. Others claim warnings were ignored. Either way, the result was the same. Bobby, just 21, didn't make it out. Once a beloved child star, Bobby had won hearts as Harold Baxter in Hazel, a sitcom that thrived in the early 60s. But when the show ended in 1966, so did his Hollywood career. Unlike many child actors who fought to stay in the industry, Bobby seemed content stepping away. He returned to South Dakota, finished high school, and lived a quiet life far from the glitz of Los Angeles. Yet Hollywood's golden glow fades fast. The final season of Hazel had been rocky, cast shakeups, declining ratings, and whispers of behind-the-scenes tension. When the show wrapped, opportunities dried up. Some say Bobby simply outgrew the industry, while others speculate that the transition from child star to adult roles was an uphill battle he never wanted to fight. Then came that fateful evening. Driving alone, he approached the bridge, a structure still bearing the scars of that catastrophic flood. His car went over the edge and into the rushing water below. Some reports claim he was killed instantly, while others suggest he may have been trapped inside. Either way, by the time help arrived, it was too late. Fans were stunned. Bobby had seemingly avoided the usual pitfalls of child stardom. No scandals, no high-profile struggles, yet his story ended in heartbreak all the same. A young life cut short, a Hollywood career left behind, and a reminder that sometimes fate is the cruelest scriptwriter of all. Billy Laughlin. 16 years old. That's all the time Billy Laughlin got. One moment he was just another teenager riding a motor scooter on a quiet California street. The next he was gone. His life cut short in a tragic accident on August 31st, 1948. But rewind a few years and Billy was anything but ordinary. As Froggy in the MGM-produced Our Gang shorts, his unmistakable raspy voice made him an instant standout. Some even thought his lines were dubbed by an adult. But no, that gravelly tone, all him. He had perfected it as a kid, reportedly by mimicking Popeye after playing with a puppet his mom gave him. It was a gimmick that worked until it didn't. When MGM's Our Gang era ended in 1944, Billy didn't chase Hollywood like some of his co-stars. No auditions, no desperate attempts to stay in the spotlight. He just went back to being a regular kid. And maybe that's the saddest part, because he never got the chance to decide what came next. That August day, Billy and a friend were delivering newspapers on a motor scooter when a truck blindsided them. His friend survived. Billy didn't. The impact threw him 40 feet. He was rushed to Covina Hospital, but the injuries were too severe. 16 years old. A life that could have been anything, gone in an instant. Peggy Ann Garner. In 1945, Peggy Ann Garner was Hollywood's golden girl. At just 13, she won an Academy Juvenile Award for her heartbreaking role in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Critics called her a revelation, a talent beyond her years. But Hollywood has a short memory, especially when it comes to child stars. Within a decade, the same industry that celebrated her had all but moved on. Garner's mother, Virginia, had been the architect of her early success, pushing her into modeling and talent contests before she was even in grade school. And it worked. By the early 1940s, Garner was landing major roles, working alongside some of Hollywood's biggest names. But as she grew older, the offers dwindled. She was no longer the wide-eyed child audiences adored, and Hollywood didn't know how to market her as an adult actress. She tried to reinvent herself on Broadway, appearing in productions like Bus Stop, but it wasn't enough to reignite her career. By the 1960s, acting jobs were scarce, and Garner had to find other ways to make ends meet. She took jobs in sales and later worked in hotel management, an unthinkable fate for someone who once held an Oscar in her hands. Her personal life wasn't much kinder. She married 3 times, each ending in divorce. Some who knew her say she struggled with personal demons, though the full extent of her hardships remains unclear. She made sporadic television appearances, but the magic of her early career never returned. And in 1984, at just 52, she died of pancreatic cancer. As for her Academy Award, some whisper that it vanished over the years, its whereabouts unknown. Whether lost, stolen, or simply misplaced, the trophy that once symbolized her bright future is now just another mystery in Hollywood's long history of forgotten stars. Bobby Jordan. Bobby Jordan was a Hollywood success story, until he wasn't. By his mid-teens, he was making a steady income as part of the Dead End Kids, rubbing shoulders with Humphrey Bogart and Dead End in the late 1930s. The franchise evolved into the East Side Kids and later the Bowery Boys. But while Leo Gorcey and Huntz Hall became the faces of the series, Jordan's role shrank. Frustrated and reportedly earning less than his co-stars, he walked away, only to find Hollywood had little interest in him without the gang. Then came World War II. Jordan enlisted in the Army Air Forces, but his service took a toll. Reports suggest he suffered a knee injury, though details remain murky. When he returned, the industry had moved on. Work was scarce, and Jordan drifted from one odd job to another: bartender, doorman, even selling photos door to door. His marriage crumbled, and alcohol became a constant companion. By the early 1960s, his health was failing, and cirrhosis of the liver set in. On September 10, 1965, he died at 42, struggling financially and long removed from the spotlight. Once a promising young star, he became another cautionary tale of Hollywood's unforgiving nature. Beverly Washburn. Beverly Washburn had Hollywood in the palm of her hand, until she didn't. In the 1950s, she was everywhere. Old Yeller, The Loretta Young Show, Wagon Train. But the moment she outgrew her childlike innocence, the industry turned its back. Typecast as the perpetual waif, she struggled to transition into adult roles. Casting directors dismissed her. Too old for little girl parts, too inexperienced for mature ones. Hollywood's infamous Catch-22. Despite starring in one of Disney's most beloved films, she couldn't secure steady work. By the 1960s, her name had faded from marquee lights. Financial hardship followed. Unlike today, early TV actors earned no residuals, leaving many child stars, Washburn included, without long-term financial security. She later turned to writing, recounting her Hollywood struggles in her memoir, Real Tears. Though she remains a beloved name in classic film circles, mainstream fame slipped through her fingers, a stark reminder of how quickly Hollywood forgets its former darlings. George Spanky McFarland. George Spanky McFarland was one of the most recognizable faces of our gang, charming audiences with his chubby cheeks and mischievous grin. But Hollywood has a way of discarding its child stars, and McFarland was no exception. When our gang ended in 1942, he found himself adrift in an industry that had outgrown him. Typecasting was a curse. No one wanted Spanky as anything other than the lovable troublemaker he had played for a decade. Offers dried up, and he was forced to leave the industry behind. McFarland bounced between jobs, eventually finding stability in sales and working his way up to a national training director for Philco Ford. But no matter how far he tried to distance himself from his past, the shadow of Spanky followed him. Fans still recognized him, some expecting him to be the same roly-poly kid from the silver screen. The nostalgia was a blessing and a burden. He was famous, but only for something he could never escape. Despite his pop culture legacy, McFarland struggled with financial instability at times, and rumors swirled that he resented his early fame. Some claim he once admitted, "I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience, and I wouldn't take a penny to do it again," though the authenticity of the quote remains debated. What's certain is that Hollywood moved on, leaving Spanky McFarlane to navigate a world that had no place for former child stars. Diana Sarah Carey, Baby Peggy. Flames roared as the set burned around her, but 4-year-old Baby Peggy didn't flinch. In The Darling of New York, she clung to a collapsing building. No stunt double, just a terrified child performing for the camera. That was the reality of Hollywood's youngest silent film star. By 5, she was earning close to $1 million a year, headlining films like Captain January. But behind the scenes, a nightmare. Her father, a former Hollywood stuntman and extra, controlled everything. Her contracts, her schedule, her money. She worked 6 days a week, endured dangerous stunts, and had no childhood to speak of. In one scene, she was held underwater so long she fainted. In another, she rode under a moving train. The studios didn't care. She was a gold mine. And so was her father. Then, just as quickly as she rose, she fell. A dispute between her father and a studio executive, details remain murky, led to her blacklisting. Practically overnight, the $1 million child star was unemployable. Worse, the fortune she had earned, gone. Her father's reckless spending and poor financial decisions left the family penniless. By her teenage years, she was working as a department store clerk just to get by. But Baby Peggy, now Diana Sarah Carey, refused to be a forgotten relic of Hollywood's past. She reinvented herself as a writer and historian, exposing the brutal truths of child stardom. She even worked alongside Jackie Coogan, another child star who had been financially ruined, to push for stronger protections for young actors. Their efforts helped strengthen the Coogan Law, ensuring future child stars wouldn't suffer the same fate. In 2016, she was inducted into the Classic Film Hall of Fame. And in 2020, at 101 years old, she passed away, the last surviving silent film star, and one of the few who lived to tell the truth about what really happened behind Hollywood's golden curtain. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.